We're not just going to go in and say, my company's great, meet with us. I want to tell you all about it. Who cares? But if you give them some content, a case study or an ROI calculator, it's much stickier, and it'll get you more new first meetings.
Welcome to It Comes Down to This. Today's guest is Aaron Gutowski, a seasoned fractional sales leader who's worked with business owners from 5 to 50 million in revenue to build scalable, efficient sales teams. I invited Aaron on the show because so many of you have told me you're stuck in the sales role and can't seem to scale beyond yourself. Aaron helps owners hand off sales without losing momentum and build systems that actually work. In this episode, we talk about why founders struggle to let go, how to build a sales team that sells without you, and what sales playbooks, CRM systems, and buyer journeys should actually look like. You'll also hear why sales and marketing alignment isn't just a buzzword and how to finally get it right. In today's episode, it comes down to this. You can't keep doing it all, and if you try, you'll burn out before you break through. Welcome to The Marketer, everybody. It's fantastic to have you back with us. We have an excellent show for you today. I am talking to Aaron, who is a phenomenal salesperson. And as you know, at The Marketer is usually about marketing. But based on some responses from people who follow the show on a regular basis, they said, you know what? We'd love to hear more about sales too. And since sales is basically goes hand in hand with marketing, I decided in this season, we're going to take a few episodes and we're going to deal just specifically with sales. So Aaron, you are a fractional sales leader. I'm very excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Oh, thanks very much. I'm happy to be here. Look forward to speaking with you today.
You betcha. So with your focus on fractional sales leadership, you've had a fantastic career, but what led you to focus on helping owner-operators manage their sales and doing it from a fractional standpoint?
Sure. So I was in a corporate job leading a sales unit for a large corporation, and I was fortunate enough to get a large equity payout. So it gave me some choices and some freedom where I can decide what I really wanted to do. And I've always enjoyed meeting leadership. When I was leading a sales team, I would get involved with customers, and often I really bonded with the senior leaders of these firms. So I thought about it and said, that's a lot of fun for me to go in and help out an organization. And I especially have a lot of respect for these CEOs who put their heart and soul into these businesses they build up, but they just reach a certain point where their growth kind of stalls and they need help. And that's when they bring somebody like me in.
Big need. I work with a lot of clients who, owners, founders, they grew the company, right? And they are the sales leader. And typically, if it's a service-based industry, they're responsible for the relationships, and they are the ones that have put this company on their back, just grassroots growing it day after day. What have you found with people like that once they get to a certain point, you have to look at handing off sales? Why do you think it's so hard for business owners to quit that sales role and hand it off?
It's what they've always done. They've built these firms from scratch, and they've had to do a lot of different things. They've had to wear all the hats. So in some cases, they're doing the books and they're help designing the product. They're actually implementing a product. But they reach a point where they are kind of at wit's end because they're out of time. So I'd say the reason it's tough for them to give up is they're creatures of habit. It's what they've always done. and they enjoy meeting the new customers. And there's a level of trust that they don't have with a salesperson. Maybe they've just had bad experiences. They've tried to do it, but because they've never led a sales organization, they know how to sell, but they don't necessarily know how to build a sales organization and all the intricacies involved.
I think that's a really great point. Um, a lot of people are exceptional at selling. Um, when you have a vision, when you believe in what you're doing, when you've got a lot of experience in that, when you're a people person, it can be easy for owners to network, go out and establish those relationships, sell that company, but then creating the systems and the processes and then handing that off, your baby, so to speak, to somebody else to drive it can be a real challenge. So, what do you feel like is the tipping point for somebody to go, okay, I can't do this anymore? I know it's time, but that draw to hang on is so tight. What do you recommend?
They reach that point where they're out of time. They've reached a capacity. They're doing all the selling, and usually maybe it's a visit with their accountant, and their accountant says you've stopped growing. In fact, your business has declined a little bit, and it's a wake up call. And there's like, boy, I'm doing everything I can. I'm out of time. I can't do anything else. So when the CEO's sales capacity reaches a limit, their revenue reaches a limit. So those two things go hand in hand. And generally, they are looking for help, and they'll meet one of us or they'll meet one of my colleagues at a networking event or something. It's like, how can you help me build a sales operation? There was a guy I was working with. He's down in the Maryland area, and he was running an energy services provider. They went into commercial buildings and made them more energy efficient and lowered their utility bills. So he was finding he was having to get up at 3:30 in the morning to work on proposals. And he's like, I'm a successful businessman and I have no time. I'm not getting enough sleep. And he's also a competitive bodybuilder, and he didn't have time to devote to that. So he really needed the help. And we joked, is like, okay, my goal, if this engagement is successful, is we're going to get you more sleep, and we're going to get you more time to spend with the things that are important to you, like your family and everything else. So we ultimately did that, um, helped him put in a sales operation with a separate sales team with process. And ultimately, we were able to get the company growing again.
I think that's really excellent insight in that, you know, primarily what people are focused on is, they have passions and they have things that they want to be doing, but they are almost tied down. And, what they've been passionate for in growing this business, they've done for however long. And now it's almost become a burden, right? They still want to see it grow, but they're wearing so many hats and they don't know what to push off. Well, sales tends to be one of the primary ones that you should push off. But when you come into companies, typically what's the size of company that we're talking about where the owner is still kind of the operator, is becoming burdened by wearing so many hats? What size of organization are we talking about?
These are firms, they range anywhere from 5 million in annual revenue on up to 50 or even 100 million. They've just reached this capacity. It depends on the firm. In some cases, the CEO is doing all the selling, the CEO owner's doing all the selling. In some cases, he or she's already put in a sales operation, and then they've reached capacity there. So it was another company I worked with, also down in the Maryland area, that helped out charities, and They had a really great sales operation and process, but they wanted to scale it beyond what it already was. So we went in and built out some more playbooks for the sales team to follow, and ultimately we were able to add capacity by adding more people with an onboarding program that trained them up and got them productive in terms of reaching new customers. And ultimately, they expanded their business. We were able to grow their pipeline by over $5 million within the course of about 6 months. So that was that. Yeah, that was a very good result. And we were really pleased with how they were able to adapt to the new operational type of focus.
Let's talk about that playbook a little bit. You know, typically an owner operator that's still focused entirely around, they're the owner of the relationships and so on and so forth. Have you ever gone into an organization and the owner doesn't want to hand those relationships off, but wants to maintain all of those relationships and build a sales team that will go build a new relationships to grow the business?
That's quite common. In fact, that's usually the quote Achilles heel of these organizations. They're very good operationally speaking in terms of delivering their service or product to their customer base, but often they're not very good at acquiring new clients in new markets. So we take a look at there was another firm I helped that had they offered, they're really a recruiting firm. They recruited nurses internationally for large healthcare because there's a huge nursing shortage. They had a tremendous demand because they started right after COVID and they grew to close to $50 million in a short period of time. But they didn't have any process in place. And frankly, they were working with some very big large university-based healthcare systems, but they were missing a big opportunity with smaller hospitals and smaller healthcare systems. So we put a focus in place around how to market to those specifically, and we designed a sales playbook so they could get more new first meetings with the heads of nursing, with the heads of HR, and in some cases the CEO of these hospitals. So ultimately, that was successful as well. We were able to have them within a course of about 4 months. We were able to get them to expand their business by about $250,000.
As a fractional sales leader, you're coming in and oftentimes you're taking a look at the sales process that an organization has. Do you find that you typically they have either no sales process? It's kind of fly by the seat of your pants. I'm the business owner. I own all the relationships. I don't need a process. Or is it that they have poor process and that you need to change all of those processes as you go?
Yeah, I would say in many cases they're what I would consider um, unconsciously competent. They know how to sell their product, but they haven't broken down the actual steps in the customer journey or the customer buying process. So often people in sales leadership roles talk about a sales process. It's really a buying process. What happens to a client when they visit your website? Where do they go? How do they end up with a salesperson? Does a salesperson give them a good overview of the company? Maybe it's the CEO who's doing that, who's reluctant to give up control. But we found that the same firm that was doing the recruiting for nurses at hospitals, they were having a lot of inbound leads, but a lot of times they were candidates uh, 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 like nurses that were looking for jobs. And they had to figure out where we had to do something operationally to make sure that we wanted to talk to those nurses, but we didn't want the salespeople to talk to them. That was a waste of their time. So we wanted to make sure we had a process set up so we routed the incoming leads to the right people.
That right there is why I like having salespeople on the show now, because, you know, you identified a problem, which marketing departments sometimes miss, right? We have a website and the goal there is to develop leads. Well, what's happening is we're also filtering in people that are not leads, yet they're still being captured and going to the salespeople, which then in turn, the salespeople are wasting their time on that and they're not being filtered into the right place. How how much do you work with marketing departments when you're coming into companies and setting up sales organizations within?
I'm glad you brought that up because it at the top of the call you were talking about demand to hear about the sales side. Really, marketing, they're going in, often developing the messaging. They're looking at they're speaking to clients, they're finding out the value proposition and clarifying it. They're developing the ideal customer profile. They create personas around the right people to contact. With the recruiter, it was okay. We want to get with heads of nursing and heads of HR. What are their typical needs and so forth. So often there's a strategy that's been put in place, then it needs to be executed. So at Chief Outsiders, we have something called the growth gears, which is a framework for how we engage with our clients. So the first gear is really the insight gear. It's to assess the current situation, learn the company inside and out, and that gear will help drive the second gear, which is the strategy. So you really need to have all the insights down before you develop a strategy. And then usually at that point, you can bring in the execution gear, which is the salespeople, where they're taking all that sales collateral, the ICP, the target account list, the messaging, and they're turning it into a playbook to go after cold call people, send them emails, send them LinkedIn messages. There's a lot of contacts they have to do before they score that new first meeting for new opportunities.
It's interesting what you said there, in that it sounds like the way you position it is you want to focus on the strategy at the top level. That includes the marketing department. And so you're defining your messaging, you're defining that ICP, ideal client persona, for those that are listening, and you want to create that messaging strategy and the sales approach. And you said something earlier that I really resonate with, which is a customer journey. Um, every company has a customer journey, and that is, goes from, oh, I've discovered that I have a problem. Now I need to learn how I'm going to solve it, and then who's going to solve it, and what's the price going to be, and then I'm going to select who solves that. So are you involved um, from that beginning stage of discovery all the way through close? And is that kind of what you've defined as your sales process, and including the different element like a CRM and an automation outreach and program and so on and so all the way through that?
Yes, and there's a lot of talk about how much of a client research used to be done with a salesperson. They would learn about the product through the salesperson. Much of that occurs online now by them doing a Google search. I'm having a problem with X. I'm going to do a Google search. It's going to drive me to this website. And there's all the SEO strategies to make sure your company's at the top of the list. That is what my CMO colleagues, chief outsiders, it's not just chief sales officers, it's chief marketing officers. So they're getting that top of the funnel lead to come in. Once it comes in, we have to turn it into an opportunity to keep them interested. So the worst thing you want to have happen is the handoff from marketing, a marketing generated lead going to sales, and the sales team doesn't execute on it or doesn't follow up on a timely basis. It should be a matter of minutes that a team follows up on a new opportunity that comes over from marketing, not hours, not 24 hours. It's like minutes, because you've got to be competitive and get a hold of that client. There's nothing better than a potential client who says, wow, you got a hold of me so fast. Yeah, we're anxious to learn how we can help you. The other thing that marketing brings to the table is developing use cases that sales can use to push out to clients. Here's how we helped out other clients. This is, and they're not going for a meeting, they're just educating the prospective customer on what's happening. And that's something we did at the recruiter. We took some use cases and developed them into case studies that talked about how we helped a certain size hospital bring down their recruiting costs in terms of nursing and deliver better care for their patients.
Have you ever faced a situation where you go into a company and one of their primary problems is that sales and marketing don't communicate? Um, the marketing is creating all these leads, and come to the end of the year when we're now going to talk about revenue and why we haven't hit our numbers, marketing says, well, sales team isn't doing their job. That's why. And then the sales team goes, yeah, well, we could do our job, but we're delivered lousy leads. Doesn't fit our ideal client persona. They're not ready to buy and they don't want to buy. So have you faced that? And what did you do to solve it?
Well, it is a case where there's just not the alignment and they're not on the same page. So my job one is, as much as I meet with the CEO weekly. I also become part of the senior leadership team. I find it's really beneficial to meet with the chief marketing officer or whoever's responsible for it on a weekly basis, so we can agree on, okay, how's this bit of content coming in terms of that you're creating that we can use to push out to customers or potential customers to drive new first meeting for new opportunities. Here's an industry trend we've recognized. Maybe you can create a use case and help us with it. We're not, we don't have the capabilities and or the resources to really develop slick collateral and slick case studies and use cases. ROI calculators are awesome. Wherever you can have an ROI calculator. The firm I helped on the charity side, they developed a great use case, but it wasn't being utilized. So I made it mandatory with the sales team. On every deal, we're going to utilize this opportunity analysis, because it was extra work for the sales team. But I made sure that they did it to leverage it, because when it got to the final decision, the economic buyers of those clients, usually a board of directors at a large charity, they want to see the return that this solution that they're about to invest close to $100,000 in is really going to deliver a return.
Walk me through that opportunity calculator a little bit. Can you tell me what that is and what's involved? I think that would be something excellent for listeners to hear.
Absolutely. So in the case of the firm that helped out the charities, what they helped with was identify donors who've donated money before, but also would have a propensity to make a major gift or even a legacy gift after they pass away. So how do you find those people if you've got more than 10,000 donors in your database? You have to send them a survey. So what we would ask for in the early stages of the buying process on the charity side is, hey, why don't you give us your number of your donors. We're going to plug it into our analysis here, and we'll come up with the average return that we can calculate in terms of major gifts. And we would come up with a specific number. If you invest just under $100,000 in our solution, we're going to deliver this many millions of dollars in legacy and major gifts. So that really opened the eyes of the leadership, not just the executive sponsor who was responsible for fundraising, but the board of directors, the leadership team of these charities. And that just helped us increase our close rates dramatically.
Oh, I can imagine that it would. Those are that's a great example for like a nonprofit that's got a list of maybe past and current donors.
Right.
Is there a way to do that same thing for a company that's looking for new business and not focused on current or past customers? Like how would a common business saying, I need new leads, how do I rank these leads? What should they do?
It in many cases just let me be clear on the question. So this is a business who wants to develop an ROI calculator so they can find new sales.
No, more of, okay, I've got a lead coming in. I've got a
Right.
lead, right? However that is. Either they buy a list or they've got somebody's coming in from their website. How do they rank that lead in terms
Oh,
of probability of close, if you would? Like
sure,
how?
sure. Lead scoring is one way to do it, and you can assign a certain number of attributes to leads coming in. So at the hospitals where the nurses, we were replacing the nurses, we identified hospitals that were in the 250 beds, approximately between 250 and 500. These were hospitals that they were in rural areas where it was not as easy to recruit people. Nurses often want to work in big markets and big cities. So the international nurses, they're not concerned about that. They're just concerned with a better lifestyle and living in the US. So it was important to have that segmentation down. Whereas some of the major hospitals, we found that the president of the company was just best for them to continue to sell to them on their own, and we would go after the smaller size ones. So it's about understanding the size of the organization, and then what title of person are you talking to? Are you talking to a frontline recruiter? Probably not a good lead. Or are you talking to the head of HR or the head of nursing? That's probably a good lead. So those titles and personas are important as in terms of identifying that, and then what their cost of recruiting was. How much do they have to pay a nurse to join them, including signing bonuses and so forth. So all those kinds of aspects would feed into that firm's ROI calculator, so they can see the return on investment for doing business with that firm.
See, I think it's an important conversation because too often, um, when you're dealing with owner founders that wear the hat, they don't come up with that, right? They're just focused on relationships, referrals, so on and so forth, and that's kind of how they've grown their business. But it's very important if you want to scale beyond yourself that you do have some of these systems and processes in place, isn't it? That I
Yes.
need to understand what a lead is. I need to understand the value of a lead and how to score that so that
Right.
my team knows what to go after, how to communicate with that person, and how to close them. And what you were talking about a little bit earlier, that from a strategy standpoint, meeting with that CEO, that owner founder, on a weekly basis and going, okay, let's review leads. Let's go in and let's maybe rank these, in terms of importance for our team, so that they know what to go after. Because so often, to what you said earlier, was exactly the truth, in that where owner founders struggle and where sales teams struggle is new leads.
Right.
I've got existing relationships, I've got referral sources, but if I want to go out and find a new lead on my own today, I'm not having anybody else bring it in. I'm developing a new relationship and I'm closing. That gets really difficult.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's almost like deer in headlights all of a sudden. Okay, I know how to do this, but I've not done it this way. And
Yeah.
that's where you help.
Yes. What we'll do is talk about who we're going to target. So we're not doing random acts of marketing or random acts of sales. We're actually going after qualified accounts. We've identified the right titles and the right individuals, and then we're going to send them something. We're going to give them things. We're going to give them things that are going to help them do their job better. We're not just going to get from them. We're not just going to go in and say, my company's great, meet with us. I want to tell you all about it. Who cares? But if you give them some content, a case study, or an ROI calculator, figure out how much money you can be saving with this solution, that's much more, it's much stickier, and it'll get you more new first meetings. Doesn't mean you're going to have success every time. Most approaches are going to not lead to anything, but there is a certain percentage that you can get to as long as you're pushing out gives. It's a difference when you walk down the street, and I mean, I live in New York City. There's these folks that kind of stake out the corners. Do you have a minute for Greenpeace? Actually, no, I'm in a hurry. I'm late. I've got to go. But if somebody's handing out a breakfast bar, I'm probably going to take. So that's a give versus a get. And I apply those same principles when I'm talking about when I'm meeting with the sales team and developing these strategies and meeting with marketing. Is like, what kind of content can we push out there that'll get their interest? It's not asking for a meeting. It's like, here, take a look at this. This is what other people in your position are doing.
I really like that. I think that's a great approach. That give to get, or give over get approach. Um, and from a marketing standpoint, I think all my marketers who are listening right now, I think that's very important, is figure out how you can deliver content. I I hate gated content, by the way. Gated content where people have to go out and give their life's information in order to get some freebie download that ultimately they wind up being disappointed in. Just give it away, and let them have it, because back to this customer journey, at the point that they become educated, you've now become a trusted source, and they will then reach out to your teams. If you're gating everything and it's more of a get scenario, you're going to have far less. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Make it easily accessible on your website, a quick one-click download. Um, and go from there. That's often if and also you can push that content out in an email or in a LinkedIn, attach it to a LinkedIn in-mail message and so forth, other social media, you can promote it. So wherever you're pushing it, you can push it out and then follow up with a phone call. It takes a lot of touches to get a client to the table. Microsoft studied it's 13 touches.
That's an absolute excellent segue, because I was just about to ask you, the data, by the way, on salespeople and their follow up is abysmal, right?
Sure.
So many salespeople, they'll have one attempt basically, and that's it.
Yeah, they
If
give
they
up.
don't get an answer, well, They don't want it, you know.
Right.
But it, what you just said, it can take up to 13 touches. Now, some of that can include marketing material, but what have you seen for salespeople that are having to get in front of people? How many attempts does it take? And what do you advise them on in terms of follow up?
I advise automate as much as possible. There are great solutions out there. CRMs often have the ability to send out a sequence emails with steps in between. So you send an email, you follow up with a phone call. Mostly you're leaving voicemails. Um, it helps me in coaching because those will get recorded in the CRM. I can hear what they're saying when they're leaving messages, or when they get somebody live and what they're saying. It it generally speaking, a good inside sales team that's booking meetings is doing 80 to 100 outbound dials a day. They're sending out emails on top of all that. They're sending LinkedIn connections. So I could tell you, even from my own experience, because I sell chief outsiders. I recently found a client that I engaged with on LinkedIn. It literally it took, ironically, 13 in mails to get this guy to show up to a new first meeting with me. So he ultimately, we're very close on a proposal. We fingers crossed we'll close it. Uh, it it just, you've got to persevere, and that is um, a certain mindset and discipline that salespeople need to have. And it's actually exciting. They know that every time they pick up the phone or every email they send out, it's an opportunity to find a new opportunity. The other thing you can do is talk about cold calling. There's also warm calling. Okay, where can you get referrals from your existing client base, especially people who have gone from one firm to a new firm and they've used your solution before? Those are incredibly warm leads. They already know you and trust you. They're willing to introduce you to the right people, or maybe they're the buyer at the new firm. So we call those former friendlies. Anybody that has used a product and gone to a new organization. Those are needed to be need to be developed, but often they're very warm.
It brings up kind of where I wanted to go for this last segment, which is how hard is it to find good salespeople? You know, as a fractional, you're coming in. I imagine a lot of the things that you're going to have to do is help find qualified salespeople to add to the team, or to evaluate the sales team that they have and get rid of the people that aren't going to work. How do you is the best approach to find new people that are, maybe they've been in the industry at some point or know something about the industry but are not associated with it currently? Or do you go and try and kind of pull some talent away from competitors, if you would, to bring in? What's the best approach?
Number one, I focus, maybe there's somebody internally at the organization who might not be in the right job. Maybe there's a client success person that really wants to make more money and is really adept at selling. So you can do some things to test for that. There's different personality profiles that you can use. There's an outfit called Caliper that's a great indicator whether somebody's got the personality to be successful in sales. But I look for three things. I look for somebody who is got an ego need to win. They like to win. They like to win often. So they get that hit and they want to go get the next one. But also they're empathetic. That means they'll be willing to listen to a potential client to help solve their problems. So they have to show a certain amount of empathy. But then another aspect around ego is ego strength. So are they resilient when somebody says no to them, can they turn it around, or can they go on to the next one and be just as enthusiastic? So those three aspects are what I look for. It's always difficult to find um, really good salespeople, but often you can develop. I really like getting people in at the appointment setting level. We call them sales development reps or SDRs. Bring them in, see if they can be successful at doing that in terms of the number of outbounds and managing a potential pipeline for new business. And if they're successful there, they can go to the next step. So it's sort of like a farm team internally at the firm. So that often works well in terms of developing talent.
I really like that. Last question I have to kind of round that out is, how long do you give a person to kind of develop them? And what's maybe some of the key performance indicators, if you would, that determines whether or not that they'll make it?
If you've if you've recruited properly and you've gone after those three characteristics, then prove it out. See how they're trending in terms of it. You would onboard them. The onboarding is probably going to take 30 days to get them fully trained up so they know where everything is and what kinds of things they should be saying when they call a new prospect. What you want to see is, can they get the activity down? So it's an analogy would be somebody who goes to a gym and they're willing to put in the repetitions with the proper form when they're doing the exercise. So are they doing the activity on a daily basis? Are they getting in the requisite number of outbound calls? Are they saying the right things when they call? And are they able to connect with people and then convert meetings? Are they able to get one new first meeting a day booked, 5 a week, 20 a month? As long as they're trending up over time, to answer your question, finally, 6 months is where you want it. You've got a pretty good indication as to whether somebody's going to make it. You need to give them a fair chance. Some people who've done the job before can come in and quite easily do it. Other folks take a little bit longer. They may not be used to that level of activity, but generally speaking, it's about 6 months.
And are sales teams, when you are out kind of building these teams and stuff, or owner operators that are handing all this off, are they typically salaried? So you're giving them a base plus a commission, and how does it average out? Do you scale their salary back as they start to find success over time? Or what have you found the best approach? Is it more of an incentive based approach or more of a foundation approach?
Generally speaking, it's 50-50. So 50% salary and 50% commission with no cap. So that's really important. So for an entry level SDR person, you're going to pay them something under 6 figures in terms of a salary, depending on what location they're in. People in New York or LA, San Francisco, they're going to demand higher salaries. But as you go to smaller markets, you can often get really great people for a lower base salary. And with COVID, it really proved out that you can have a team anywhere virtually and still be effective. So the incentive part has to be aligned to the company's goals. So commission should be higher for new opportunities as opposed to existing. So it incentivizes them and keep them focused on new opportunities. Or you can separate the teams and just say, you can only call on new opportunities. You can't call on existing. We're going to have the farmers over here with the existing accounts. They're going to get as much as they can and cross-sell, upsell. and you're focused on the new logos, but you have an opportunity to make more money. And usually the best paid people are the ones bringing in the new opportunities.
Excellent conversation, Aaron. I did want to do a show like this that was just kind of purely sales related. How do you build the sales team? How does the owner hand this off? How do you kind of manage these teams with the marketing messaging to the sales or the buyer journey and so on and so forth? It really delivered. Everybody that's listening and watching, I hope you got as much insight out of this conversation as I did. Aaron, it was awesome to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Monty. I'd love to do it again soon.
Absolutely.